I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write a story.
Hello, everybody that's out there listening to the sound of my voice. Hope you're all doing great. It's Gary Wise, Wise Leadership Solutions, coming to you from Ocala, Florida. Half a day, all the above, right? Today, I've got a very special guest here with me. He was a shipmate with me on board the USS George Washington, CVN 73 out of Yokosuka, Japan. He's a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer of the Hospital Corpsman Flavor. He goes by the name of Mr. David Kano. David, how you doing, man?
Good, Gary. Thank you, brother. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, man. I'm good. Well, I'm not gonna lie, I'm tired. I taught all day today in class. I'm teaching about the Korean War right now. And we went from World War II into the Cold War, and now it's the Korean War. And I'm telling the kids as I'm talking, like, look, I want you guys to understand this is communism versus us, right? And if you look at the world after World War II, it's when the communists really got linked up, right? The Russia, the China, the North Korea, the Cuba, right? They all started syncing up, and their first foray into making a move was Korea, right? That was their first foray. And I tell them, like, you know what? That attack, that whole Korean Peninsula problem is still in my top 3 major concerns for the world, right? If I look at the world through my lens of what would cause the most instability, right? And for me, number one, of course, is a terrorist threat to our country, whether foreign or domestic, doesn't matter. That's number one. Number 2, of course, is the China problem. And then number 3 is Korea. And I tell them at Korea, for me, it's because it's not that we couldn't win Korea, because we will. It's what does it mean? What's going on behind the scenes to cause that provocation to then become a thing? And then I said, now look at the world today, and are there still communists in the world? Yes or no? And they'll say, well, yeah. So, okay, well, think about that, right? And whether it was Korea, whether it was Vietnam, those two big, the other ones we got ourselves into, whether it was Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever it was, that was us handling war on terror or handling, Saddam Hussein in the Gulf War, right? But both Vietnam and Korea was communism, right? And as I look at the world stage layout, how it is today, I have a feeling the world's still going to cut along those lines. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think, and I love the tapping into history, to start the conversation, because as a lot of my folks, a lot of friends know that I've always loved history, and especially 20th century history. And exactly to your point, when we think about post-World War II era stuff, Korea, Vietnam, a lot of those alliances and the history of those alliances still exist to a high degree. And as we still see today, but particularly China, back then in the Korean War, China, right, was really starting to flex its muscles as a future communist power. And a lot of the funding and the support, right, but basically came from China itself. So, yeah, I think moving into today, a lot of the alliances and the partnerships, so that existed back then still are present today, even though the world has evolved. Like you said, different threats have manifested themselves regionally, politically throughout the world. The threats have evolved all throughout the world. There's new threats today, right, of different sorts, but that one is still present.
Well, and I think the alliances are actually getting an update, if you will. They're getting refreshed right now for the world. And what's really interesting about all this is when I first started this series with the kids, it was the same week China was throwing that big spectacle where they brought the North Korean leader down, they brought the Russian leader down, and they were commemorating their victory in World War II, right? Yeah. And I was telling the students, like, look, everything I just taught you about World War II, where was China and Russia in any of those battles in the Pacific to take down the Japanese Empire? Not there, non-existent, right? They were all occupied. Unfortunately, both China and Japan was occupied by Japan, right? They wanted us to win that war because
Yeah.
they wanted to be liberated from the Japanese Empire. Because
Mhm.
I tell them, the Japanese were some bad dudes. They were
Yeah.
freaking, they were
Yeah.
brutal, man. And
Yeah.
it was what it was. But
Yeah.
in the vacuum of power after that war, these other empires rose up, and that communist empire rose up, and there you go. And we were not worried about all of that. We were focused primarily on Japan for our reasons, right? And I would say it's
Mhm.
probably because we felt guilty for how the war ended, and we wanted to help best stabilize that country as they move forward. And that's for the historians to debate. But we
Yeah.
provided the opening and the opportunity for places like China and Korea to grow. But what I thought was interesting was how they were trying to rewrite history in the world stage as to celebrate this ending of World War II, right? We all know whose ship the paperwork was signed on, right? When the war was said and done.
Right.
But we see that in the world, right? We see NATO alliances being questioned, and or remember when the president first got into office, right, wrong, or indifferent, he told everybody, "Hey, y'all got to pay your fair share to this team, right? If we're all a team, part of being a team is we all do the rules, and it's not just an American thing." And and I bring this up just because it's how I spent my day talking with the cadets, the young Americans that are in my classroom. And like I know, unfortunately, history it repeats itself. And
Yeah.
if we don't pay attention to the lessons of the past, they may come back for and haunt us in the future.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Totally. Yeah. We're citizens of this world. And I think that I remember I remember starting enlisting in the Navy and years ago, and then going through the whole Corpsman pipeline training, and then studying for the very first advancement exams. I mean, going way back, being an E3 studying for the first E4 exams, and I remember even then, even in this technical manual for the hospital corps, we're studying 85% of what is our technical rating. There was always the ship stuff, the basic military readiness stuff.
Yeah.
If I still remember my lingo, and I still remember snippets of content that involved national security, because at the end of the bottom line is that before we became the technical specialists in our NECs in the Navy, we were sailors first, and the job of a sailor is to defend their nation, national security, defend. We took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and protect America from all enemies, domestic and foreign. And I remember some of that information, like little snippets of history and big item stuff being in that basic military readiness manual about basic history. So it's real. And even then, like you were talking about talking to some of the cadets, we a lot of people have a tendency to really kind of condense themselves into their local or state or national or regional issues. Some people love national, international issues. Some people are more about local stuff. But no matter what, every American, every person living in their house, their neighborhood, their community, their family, wherever they're at, is still a member of a bigger stage, a part of a bigger stage. I mean, 9/11, those folks who were walking into their places of work on September 11th, they were New Yorkers. They were living in Manhattan. They were working in those buildings. They may not have been thinking about world events or terror attacks. They were just doing their job, going into a place of work with plans of leaving that building at the end of the day and going back home to their families, family, community, work. But that day, those attacks was an attack on the world, on the free world. So all of us here are members of a bigger stage, I believe. And I think that, to your point, that's something that we need to be telling young kids about. Yeah, pay attention to your family, your community, and your local scene, but also watch pay attention to news. You don't have to be a news junkie like all of us or like I am, but it does help to kind of see what's going on in the world and try to connect dots and patterns.
Brother, spot on, man. And as we're getting ready to kick into this thing again, I appreciate these conversations because I don't often get the chance to be around other veterans, other people, and have these kinds of conversations because I don't want everybody to know I don't want to get too political on things, because I go both sides of the world. I really do. Like I'm very open-minded. I very much appreciate everyone's conversation. I just hate corruption. Like, I'll be honest with you. Like, I do not like an unfair fight, right? Like, that bothers me. I don't like when things are wrong and they're broke. But I can definitely see both sides of any situation. I know there's three sides to every situation, right? Your side, and the truth somewhere in the middle. And so, and as a person that served in the military, the majority of all my adult life, let's be honest, I was shaped in a space where you had to be ready to flex to other people's needs and or desires, because I wasn't typically the most senior person in the room, right? And take your personal beliefs, put them in the pocket. You got to go to work, bro. Do your thing, and let it all. How serious is it to you? It's not that serious. Okay, then let it go. It's not worth jeopardizing a long-term relationship or making your work day any more uncomfortable than it needs to be. You know, when I first got initiated in the Chiefs mess, one of the things they pounded into us was we don't talk about religion in the mess. We don't talk about politics in the mess, right? Those are just two things that were taboo. And then as I went through my journey in my career, I found out, oh, but we did. Right? Oh, but we did. But we did it in a way that allowed for us to have authentic conversations and not be just automatically butthurt about something that somebody says, because we can have different perspectives, right? All good stuff, and I appreciate you going about with me on that. So, brother, just so I understand, or if I remember this correctly, are you born and raised in Texas?
Yes, sir. I was born in Odessa, West Texas, and we moved. Yes, I was born in Odessa, and we moved to San Antonio when I was a teenager. Okay. And spent most of my teenage years, in high school and here in San Antonio before I enlisted.
So when you were coming up as a teenager, because again, a lot of my listeners are teenagers. Mm-hmm. A lot of my students will listen into these podcasts, and they're interested because they're trying to figure out their life, and like me, you're a dad, and you've got kids that are, teens, adolescents. And so they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
As a teenager, what was it that what were you thinking about doing after high school? Were you thinking college? Were you thinking, was military immediately an option for you?
Yeah. As a teenager, ever since I was a kid and growing up into a teenager, I always had a fascination, well, not just history, but the United States Navy. Now, remember, I grew up in the 80s, right? And I remember, I was the youngest of six. My parents were Mexican immigrants. They came to the States from Mexico in 1970. And I grew up with 4 older sisters and 1 older brother. A house of 8 loud Mexicans, right? And it was fun. It was fun because there was a lot of conversation and dialogue, a lot of animation, a lot of emotion, right? But I had a fun childhood. I had a really good childhood because I had a great family, a fun family. And I remember, but it was during the Cold War. And I remember growing up, I watched a lot of movies. One thing about me as a kid, I did 2 things. I watched a lot of movies. I loved movies. Still, I'm a big movie guy, and I read a lot of books. I was always a bookworm as a kid. So I read, those old World Book encyclopedias that were books. I read like the whole thing, like Bill Gates style. I don't know what it was. I just read a lot. But I watched a lot of movies. And, in the 80s, the Stallone, the Rambo movies, all those Chuck Norris movies, there seemed to be a Cold War theme. Rambo and Rocky were always fighting against, the Soviet Union and the bad guys, right? 007 movies, there was always a component about that. And then Chuck Norris movies, things like that. So there was this, maybe it shows the gravity of entertainment in a lot of young minds growing up, but that was kind of the theme. It was us. It was the United States versus communist nations. And it seemed to be a kind of a real threat growing up in the 80s because that was the era of the Reagan buildup. Those were conversations that occurred and stuff in the aftermath of the Vietnam syndrome, which occurred for many years. So that was part of the psyche growing up. Right. And then when I became a teenager, then I just kind of became a typical teenager. I kind of developed interest in other things, right? But bottom line, there came a point when I just decided to go ahead and do it, and I decided to enlist. I went to college for 1 year, San Antonio College here in San Antonio, and but I thought to myself, what, it would be good to just enlist, and at least my initial plan was just to do 5 years and get out, serve my country, do the patriotic thing, be a veteran for life, and I did it, and I enlisted in May of 2001, 3 months before 9/11.
Ooh. What's funny about everything you just kind of brought up, similar, you and I are similar age. I was born in 1977. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. And I grew up in a household that there was concerns about the stabilization of the world, and there was concerns about Russia. And there was this fear that I think was embedded in them, coming up in that generation, if you will. Yeah. And my dad's generation, the Vietnam vets, they came back from war to a country that really didn't treat them well, right? And they didn't understand, what did they do wrong? Because they were just my dad was a sailor in the Navy who joined because of all the reasons a lot of us joined. He didn't join to go kill people. He just went to go do the thing, right? And to change his circumstance. But in our country at that time. I remember going again through Chiefs initiation. They taught us about how the press was shifted that narrative a lot during the Vietnam conflict, much different than maybe it had in the years previously, right? And of course, communication had evolved and technology has evolved and all that. So that generation was very, very, I would say, hyper focused on Russia. And I remember still seeing when the Berlin Wall came down, and that I was in junior high school when that happened, right? And this whole concept of, well, why does that wall coming down matter, and what's going on in the world? And Reagan was the president, right? And trying to figure out how America was going to be on this world stage. Then the 90s came, and that was a great decade for so many things, right? I mean, and I thought it was interesting because I was watching the Secretary of War, right, as they are currently coined now, and he said he wants to re-baseline everything to the 1990 standard. And he said, I was watching that, and he said, that's as good of his time of any, right? But when I dug more into that date that he picked in particular, was that in a lot of ways at our fundamental self as a fighting force, as a country, even 1990, we were pretty solid as a country, right? Like as a country, not just a Navy and Army and Air Force, as a country, we were pretty locked in.
1990,
right?
absolutely.
It was pretty good. I mean, yes, you had some crime or whatever it was, but it was not what it is, what it has become. And then we had a really great decade where a lot of great things happened. And then unfortunately we get attacked in 2001, right? And what we'll never know is how the world would have been different had 9/11 never happened, right? Because I remember I joined the Navy in 1997, right? So I got about 3.5 years before 9/11. And so I got the chance to be in the service before 2001 and to be in the Navy and to kind of feel that, how that was. But I remember after 9/11, just this immense fear of like, we don't know who's in our country. We don't know who's a threat. But in the service, we already knew that concern. I remember being a 20-year-old American and people asking me who was the greatest threat to our country. I'm at home on leave as a fireman from the USS Bellawood. And I'm like, look, it's terrorism. Like, we don't know where they're going to come from. That's a concern. So we knew the threat, but we still didn't prevent them from attacking us, right? Because maybe we were optimistic. Maybe we just were hopeful it was never going to happen. I remember when the Cole got hit, right? That was the first big indicator, like, oh, snap. Like, we just had a ship get broadsided by a big afloat IED, right? By a big afloat bomb. And then that was probably right about when you joined. And then a few months later, the actual 9/11 hit. And from that point on, it seemed like operations cycled up and technology just went with it, right? Like from the Nextel phones that were like do talking to where we're at today, right? It just all went together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting that you mentioned 1990 because I'm actually in the middle of reading a book right now about the history of the Pentagon and the relationship between military officials, military leadership, and civilians. And I'm still in the first couple of chapters, and part of the beginning of the book talks a lot about that particular area, the Gulf War, 1990. And I was about 12 years old when all that was going down. And of course, you had these colorful characters. You had, a president, George H.W. Bush at the time, following Reagan, who was probably the most, in terms of in American history, because I have my lists of my favorite presidents, right? But when it comes to H.W. Bush, he probably had the most impressive public service resume of any president in American history. And my three favorite presidents of all time are Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Washington, right? And H.W. is probably somewhere in the top 15. But CIA director, UN ambassador, congressman, World War II pilot, vice president, ultimately president. That was just a phenomenal public service career. And the Gulf War of 1990 was so important on so many levels because it was probably the most, it was like a Mike Tyson first round knockout of an opponent. It was the most spectacular U.S. military performance probably in history in terms of the speed and efficiency of what we did and how we did it and the alliances that we built up before the war. After the famous moniker after the war was, we finally kicked the Vietnam syndrome, so to say, because of course after Vietnam, right? And I want to say something about Vietnam, because the Vietnam generation is very near and dear to my heart. I think probably for more than any other reason is that the Vietnam War outcome was not what it could have been. It was a very sad outcome, but it was not because of the warrior and the American soldier sailor that fought in Vietnam. They were just as good, if not better, than any other generation. What they did, what they accomplished out there, it was a tough, complex war, right? But the fact of the matter is that it was just a tough rap. I mean, it was a very tough situation for them in the years that followed the war. But then when the Gulf War happened, just people felt better overall about our military and about a lot of things. And then following the Gulf War, in the 1990s, especially following the Clinton's election, I think the nation did shift. I think we started losing focus on national security. Remember the 1992 election, Clinton's famous campaign slogan, "It's the economy," and of course we had a great economic decade during the Clinton administration. But then obviously going into 2000, 2001, we had the USS Cole attack. I still vividly remember the Cole attack because the church that I was attending at the time, there was a service member who was on board whose family attended our church. So it got a lot of publicity and attention. The fact that the service member survived and they attended a church service when they came back from that attack. But yeah, I think that all these events started, I was paying a lot of attention, even as a teenager, right? As an engaged teenager into world affairs, into these events, ultimately going into when I enlisted.
Yeah. So when you went to the recruiter, and you were making this decision to serve your country, maybe get a chance to see a different part of the world, maybe do something different after, because like you said, you did a year of college and that wasn't really what you wanted to do. Did you know you wanted to get into the medical field? Because, my dad was a corpsman. And when I joined the Navy, he was like, don't do medicine. Like, don't do medicine. Right. He also told me don't be an engineer, but I didn't listen to that part, but did you know you wanted to get into medicine?
Oh, great question. You're making me think. You're making me really go back about that. So yes, I did. I was very interested in being a corpsman. I knew a little bit about the corpsman rating. I didn't know everything. What I think was a little, to be totally frank, what was kind of nerve-wracking about me, at least, and a lot of other sailors who were going to be corpsmen and fixing to go to Corps school, was the knowledge of the responsibility of being in charge of Marine Corps units. Because and I joined the Navy because I was thinking about the Navy ships, but I would say a high percentage of hospital corpsmen, when they become corpsmen, some go to clinical settings like hospitals and clinics. The corpsman rating is just so diverse. It's probably the most diverse rating, not just in the Navy, probably in the entire armed forces, right? But traditionally, percentage-wise, most corpsmen do go with Fleet Marine Force units, Marine Corps units. Some go to ships, others to clinical settings. So the idea of being responsible for Marines was kind of something that was kind of interesting in the beginning. So I went to Field Medical Service School in Camp Pendleton, and then I started my career mostly with Fleet Marine Force units before I had a chance to go to the USS George Washington. But yeah, to the question, medicine, being a corpsman, and the idea of taking care of people, healing people, was something that always had a lot of appeal and interest to me.
You know what I love about that is, I love when people come to the service and don't really have something specific in mind. I was a Navy recruiter for a few years, and I would always tell people, like, recommend you have an open mind. The ASVAB is going to tell us what areas you could be good at, and you don't have to do any of this forever. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you can get out. You can do something different. There's different opportunities. But I became an engineer that was turning wrenches on really expensive engineering equipment on ships. And I don't even work in my own car to this day, right? Like I'm good at it. I know I could do it. I have no problem learning it, but it's what I did at the job, right? Yeah. And I love that you get the chance to get exposed to something that you didn't really think about, but I know you were good at it, because I remember working with you on the ship, and you were very methodical. You were very good. I can guarantee if I was hurt, you'd be the kind of person that would reassure me and help me get through that time while we figured it out, right?
Definitely. Gary, you made me think about something. I want to point something out to you. Something came to heart right now when you were talking about the attitude that we come when we're sailors first, right? And I took that very seriously. We were taught sailors first, corpsmen second, and then our technical jobs and all the other stuff third, right? And to me, I was talking to my niece. So my niece is in the process of heading out to boot camp in a couple of weeks, and she's enlisting, and she's going to be a corpsman. My niece Elena, my sister's daughter, and we had to go away for dinner for her about a couple of days ago, and it was a nice time, before we send her off, and a couple of folks shared words for her, and then they asked me to say a couple of things to her, and I remember telling her, and this is just confessions, right? When you retire, you can just say more and stuff. One thing about me is interesting is I was not a very military type person. I was always a free spirit, an imaginative, creative guy. I wasn't what you would call a typical military guy in terms of precision, structure, and discipline. I was never that kind of guy. What I was extremely patriotic. I had a very aggressive personality in terms of going and getting things done. But I just had I had a strong personality, but I was very patriotic. And I think that helped me compensate for a lot of the deficiencies I had, typical military deficiencies, so to say, during my career. But my heart was never a question. I always put my heart into everything. And I wasn't like, probably the most skilled in a lot of areas, but I believed in common sense and helping people out. Like when I was on the ship, and you're 100% right. We come into the Navy, and we really are needs of the Navy. We don't, I think there was different philosophies that I experienced between the routes that different sailors took in terms of how to manage their career and how to interact with their environments. But I always believe this, and a lot of sailors that I worked with would say this about me, is that I always said, what is the mission? What is the job? What can I do? How can I help my sailors? And that was something I always took seriously. When I was on the ship, and, I loved engineers because they made me the work center supervisor as a corpsman. I didn't even know what 3M was. I'll tell you, when I checked on board the USS George Washington in 2011, people were talking on the ship. I'm an HM2 FMF, Iraq and Afghanistan tours, Greenside, Gung Ho. Yeah. And I start hearing about tag outs and 3M, repair lockers. And I'm like, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what is a tag out? So then I depended a lot on my engineering brothers and sisters and, the guys that knew the ship. And they made me the work center supervisor. But again, ship first. Hey, whatever. Yeah. I'll be doing my PMT job and my medical job. Hey, but now when it comes time to do maintenance, let's take care of the ship. So just a passion for service to the Navy. But I think the biggest thing is the patriotism. The patriotism is always there.
So when you were getting ready to give her your advice in that speech, were you just reminding her to be authentic to herself and to do it her way? Because that's kind of what I heard. And look, I will tell you that makes a lot of sense to me, because you went to Senior Enlisted Academy just like I did. And I remember getting exposed my first time to the Myers-Briggs type indicator test, right? And it was not till I was a Master Chief Petty Officer did I ever get an MBTI, right? No one ever offered that to me, right? I never got exposed to that. And I remember going through that course that I did. I'm pretty sure it was Senior Enlisted Academy where I did it. Yeah. And we all got these tests, and the most of us were like ESTJs, ISTJs, right? Which is, it's this what the military trained us to be, right? We're almost all STJs. But then if you're these people that are like NFPs, you're these creatives that are in the military, and it almost goes against your natural abilities or who you naturally are, but you're choosing to sacrifice that piece of you to be a part of this organization. And what I learned from that was, as I met those people later on in my career, I would treat them much kinder, right? Because when I was younger, I'd get frustrated. Like, stop daydreaming, bro. This is what we have to do. Let's get it done. Right. Why? Like, we don't know why. We don't care. We're going to go through the thing, right? But they're always asking the questions, right? Like, how come and why were this way? It doesn't make sense. And so when I learned, like, oh, there's these natural characteristics about people that just, it's inherent to them. Then I can learn, okay, well, now I can learn how to better work with that person to get the best out of them. Did you find that you had leaders throughout your career that did that for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, 100%. And, I think, you mentioned the word sacrifice. There was a word that you used in that, and that's definitely what I had to do, because again, I'm just sharing, I'm being very candid about how I really was coming in, because I struggled in boot camp. I was that guy that just, they used to joke around me when I was growing up in high school, even in the boot camp. They used to say, what happened if you cut my hands off? That I develop a speech impediment because I talk so much with my hands. You know, I'm just a very expressive person. So I really struggled going through all the pipeline. Something was triggered, but eventually it got to me. I got the discipline I broke. They were able to break me and to rebuild me. I think probably around core school. And I think it was good because what it did is that in the installation of the structure and the discipline that permeated my soul and brain, so to say, was so good because I think that it probably enhanced the other talents and abilities that I already had. So it was just a kind of like an absorption, integration of new skills on top of the creativity and the communication and stuff like that. So that was good. And I welcomed that. And then in field medical service school, after core school is field medical service school, then even more so. I mean, we're talking about Marines, United States Marines. So, I mean, the discipline is on point. And it was funny. I used my imagination to kind of transform myself, you know, and I was always doing that. I heard the word I like to use is reinvention and transformation. I said, look, this is the culture. This is the environment. I always studied like actors, method actors, how they transform themselves based on their environment and the script. That's kind of how I did because I was an actor growing up in high school and stuff. And that's kind of really what I did. Okay, forget about whatever's going on, my own propensities, right? This is the environment. This is the need. Transform myself. And I think that's kind of what happened early on in my career. And I think that I was blessed with so many good leaders to the question. So many leaders, I think, probably, you know, because leaders are wise. You know, I think, you know, the thing about, you know, when we became chiefs and senior chiefs, we saw a lot of young sailors and we saw pieces of ourselves and others when we were coming up, right? We had that understanding. And there's no doubt that when I was coming up that I had good, solid, caring chiefs and officers that definitely looked out for me. And they probably saw a lot of kinks in me, but I think that they just saw my potential. And I'm just, to this day, I'm so grateful. I think a lot about these people. And there's times I even call them. I call them out. I reach out. I reach out to them, just telling them, hey, you know, thank you for what you did years ago.
Awesome. And for your niece, just so I could did I get that right? Did you just give her that advice of to be yourself and do your best? Or what was that advice you were given to her as you were offering your recommendations?
Yeah. The biggest thing I told her, and I mean, I could have told her so much, but I wanted to tell the biggest thing. I think the most important thing I told her was, you know, because I'm a you know, as a person of faith, right? Mm-hmm. I said, Elena, I think that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, right? You have your strengths. Some others will have strengths, things like that. But I said, the biggest strength you have, the biggest advantage that you have is that you have people that love you and are praying for you.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of what I focused in. I said, I know that's how I succeeded. That was the difference maker. The fact that loved ones and family and friends were praying for me, that has been the biggest difference maker. I'm a big believer in the power of prayer. And that's essentially what I told her. I said, people are praying for you and you're going to be okay. Because I know that like every young sailor, every sailor is going to go through those moments, right? Oh my God, what did I get myself into? You know, those moments of doubt, you know, she's going to go. And I here's the thing, because I wanted to share a lot, but I didn't. I purposely restrained because I wanted to experience it. I kind of wanted to go in there raw. I didn't want to give her, I didn't want to give her the tips because who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe things have changed. I don't know. But because her experience is her own. But one thing I did want to share with her is that no matter what, to feel encouraged that she was being prayed for.
Yeah, that's huge, man. And I would say that so many people come into especially the service, but also just life, like kids that go to college, they feel isolated, they feel alone. They forget all the people that really love them and that are there for them. And I used to always tell the sailors, especially when they're going through hard times, I'd be the guy there. I'd be the one they'd be talking to, right? And I would tell them, I said, you know, I would hope that if my son or daughter was to ever join the service, there'd be somebody like me on the other side of that country, the world, sitting with my son or daughter because I couldn't be there and helping them through this hard time. And then I would always reinforce them, and you should call your mom and dad. Like, you should make a phone call home and tell them. They're going to love you. I mean, because you know how it is. These young kids get out there, start making grown decisions, right? And things go sideways, or they're in trouble or whatever it is. And it's just like, you know, I tell the kids, I'm loud by nature, right? I'm a damage control man. Right? I'm
Right.
going to be loud.
Yeah.
But if I'm angry, I'm very quiet because I don't want to say anything in anger that I'm going to regret later, right? So when people are going through hard times, I don't know that it's going to make it better by being loud or being angry on top of that, right? And I remember it always catch the sailors off guard because they were so used to being loud and leading strong that when they were really going through stuff and I was super quiet and just there with them and like wanting to help them, it would always kind of throw them for the loop. And I'm like, look, there's leadership day for day, but this is serious. Like we need to, and we're here for each other. We're a team,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be okay, and we'll get through it. Because even if you made a bad choice, and just like you, I've got my faith. I fight from a place of victory, right? I already won, right? Like I've already got the victory. And I'm not going to lead like that always in my military mindset, but I'm going to tell them it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
we'll get through this, and we'll figure it out. And I think that was probably very sage guidance for you to give to her and to remind her of that. And when you joined the military, did you come in with faith like that, or did you learn that throughout your journey? Because when I was raised in the church, I found Jesus again at boot camp, right? Because it's boot camp.
We get closer. We get closer. We get closer to the Lord in boot camp.
But I might have lost him again right after boot camp,
right?
For a little while. So did you come in with that level of faith off the bat, or is that something you kind of matured into throughout your life?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I grew up in church like you. I had always had faith years before I entered. I think that military service, especially the 9/11 generation, the operational tempo and just the culture and the psychology, the intensity that was developing within the armed forces. I think that I definitely grew in my faith, no doubt, because our Chiefs Creed says it. Our Chiefs Creed is so great. It's so accurate. It's so powerful, in terms of it encapsulates it all. It's tough. This job, wearing this uniform, is no joke. The burden, the responsibility, the pressure. And I think that the pressure of active duty life definitely drew me closer, helped me grow in my faith.
Okay. So when you graduated Fleet Marine School, you got shipped overseas to Japan, right?
Yes.
To the Marines. Yeah. And so, like you, my first duty station was Sasebo, Japan, on board the USS Bellawood. And the 31st MEU would deploy on board our ships, right?
Yeah.
We would go down to White Beach and pick the Marine. And I did that a couple ships, right? I did 3 amphibs throughout my career. So I'm a blue-green guy for sure. The only ship I didn't do was not blue-green was the carrier. So I've got a lot of experience going down to Okinawa, going down to White Beach, picking up the MEU, embarking them. And I've taken them to Iraq before. We went there in 1998 for Desert Fox, right? When we never go to Iraq, guess what? We took them to Iraq, right? So I've done that. What was that like for you as a young man graduating these schools and then getting moved overseas to Japan? Were you prepared for that? Did you want that?
Absolutely. I loved it. I was always an adventure guy. Since I was a kid, because I read a lot of history, every opportunity I had to get overseas assignments I was on it. I was so excited. When I found out that I was going to Okinawa, Japan, I was just thrilled. I'm going to be living across an ocean, right? For the first time. To me, that was thrilling. It sounded, I felt like I was in an adventure novel, like Robinson Crusoe or all these books. I felt like being able to go overseas and to live in these nations, not just go and travel and stay at a hotel and do the touristy thing and leave, but live in these nations and make friendships across the world with people from other nations was a dream come true. And, I spent the 5 years in Japan, the 5 years in Europe, 3 years in Spain, 2 years in Italy. A lot of my career was overseas. And I have an awesome wife that was just good to go in terms of being down with a lot of the overseas assignments. But I was thrilled to the question. I was thrilled about being in Okinawa. And it's funny you mentioned White Beach, because when I got to Okinawa, I was assigned 3rd Med Battalion, but I got to do one stint with the 31st MEU. And, the same routine. I was on the Fort McHenry. Yeah. And of course, the whole operation of being with the 31st MEU for that one particular cycle before I went back to medical battalion, but that was a lot of fun.
So, and what's funny about 3rd Med is when we did I was on Guam during the pandemic, And we had, of course, all of the operations in the Pacific going through Guam at that time. And of course, we had the USS Theodore Roosevelt that came in, and they had all their sailors had to get off. And they sent up Third Med from Okinawa to supplement us because we did not have the facilities. We did not have the bodies to render the care that was required to that many sailors and that many people, right? And so that was my exposure to Third Med. And I didn't even understand there was a difference between Third Med and 31st Mu at the time because I thought they were all entrenched together. And they're like, no, Third Med there's just a huge corpsman medical team available to do whatever needs to be done, right? And again, as I learn more and more about our great armed forces, and I learned a lot throughout my career, it's just so cool how much there is available to us if you ever break glass, right? Break glass. And I think that was probably the hardest part for our generation is getting put back in the box after the glass was broke, right? Because 20 years of GWOT, right? 20 years of when I train on World War II, when I train on Korea, when I train on Vietnam, none of them have 20 years of operations, right? And from 2001 till damn near 2021, there was something happening always and forever somewhere, right? And it wasn't even a thought. Like there's something happening, right? And I think for so many of us that especially, because I deployed Iraq 03, 04 on board USS Ogden, 06 Ogden, went there in 98, but that was pre 9/11. And then, of course, the GW times. I think that as busy as we were, it's anything after that's almost kind of boring, right? It's almost like what if we're not doing?
For sure.
Right? We're not doing these operations. And I think that's where the Navy struggles is because the Navy does not know how to turn down the temperature a little bit. And get back to a different baseline. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Because there's so much crap going on in the world that we're involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that's a conversation that's definitely ongoing and fascinating, no doubt, because it definitely touches on economic, political, and kind of social implications. Every generation of warfighters that have experienced combat or experienced not whether it's a combat environment or a culture of other service members that have deployed, because I always thought about the GWOT, the 9/11 generation, no matter whether a service member, Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine Corps, regardless of to what capacity they were in that combat environment in different places. The fact is that for the most part, many of us were exposed and connected to each other. So we experienced the stress and the operational stress that other service members, because we interact with it. If somebody's having issues because of multiple deployments and there's some cracks there, it's felt. It's our brother and sister, they're hurting. So we feel it. We feel the hurt. We help them out, but it's always felt throughout the service. So in many ways, we're all in it together in one shape or another. And I kind of want to bring another point out, Gary. Something that's interesting, and I think it's worth noting too, is, one of the biggest differences between the GWOT, the 9/11 generation after 2001 versus previous generations, specifically long wars. The World War II, Korea, and Vietnam were 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Vietnam was longer than World War II and Korea, nonetheless, even though casualties were dramatically higher in World War II and Vietnam than Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to say, I don't want to quote an inaccurate number, but I think we're talking about 4,000 to 5,000 versus.
Well, yeah.
Vietnam.
Ships getting sunk. Yeah,
Vietnam is like 60,000. World War II is over like somewhere around 200,000, if I'm not mistaken. But that's also really a testament to the quality of the PPE, the flak and Kevlar protection, and also just medical technology that we've had. So that's definitely a good thing. But it's not because the operational tempo was lighter. It was just that the knowledge that we had in order to save lives was a little 100%. Bit more superior with technology.
100%, man. I agree. But I think the duration, we're probably going to be studying that for years, how the impact it had on a lot of us, because again, I remember before 9/11 how it was on the ship. But the thing is, we also didn't have SCED 3.0 on the ship. We were still writing the boards on pen and paper with ink, right? So we'll never know what it would have been like if it wasn't at the war, because technology and the war just they got each other faster together, right?
Yeah.
And I think the war also streamlined technology development because now the industrial complex became a big money venture where a lot of investors came in because they could take the toys and make them even better to go out and do things. And now, of course, we have to wean ourselves off of wanting to do those things because it's not always productive for the world for there to be never-ending challenges, right?
Absolutely.
When you were at the end of your first tour with the Marines out there or with the 3rd Med in Oki, was there ever a thought that you might get out?
Absolutely. Yes, there was. I thought a lot about I thought about it during the first 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And I kind of went back and forth a few times.
Yeah.
But I was actually just having a lot of fun. That thought didn't last.
Okay.
And one of the biggest things that happened, I think at my 5-year mark, was Rebecca and I were married. I was actually in Naples, Italy for 2 years. And her and I, we decided to get married. And after her and I got married, and she loved being a military wife. She was excited about, marrying into the military. And then, of course, being very practical, thinking about the benefits, the continuity. I was moving up in rank. Money was getting a little bit better. The practicality of the medical, dental insurance, and all the quality of life benefits for couples. The practicality just really became too much. And once like a lot of guys, once I became a second class and then went into my 7th, 8th, 9th year, then I was determined to make it at least 20.
It was the same thing for me, man. When I met Erica and I decided I wanted to marry her, all I had going for me was the United States Navy, right? When I was going to go ask her dad, like, for his blessing to take her into my house and make her part of my family, I had a GED and I was a petty officer in the Navy. And that was what I had, bro. Like, I landed in Clearwater, Florida on recruiting duty with 2 sea bags and debt, right? Nothing else. So that was what I had. But she was, like you said, she was proud to become a part of the Navy's organization, to become a part, to be attached to this thing. And I tell people, my wife taught me how to be a patriot because
awesome.
Up until that point, I was not patriotic, right? I was, I was just doing it because it was a paycheck, right? And I was doing it because it was keeping me out of the streets. She taught me pride in nation and all those other things, right? Now, you leave Japan. Where do you go to next?
Left Okinawa, Japan, went to Pendleton for an Iraq deployment, and then came back to Pendleton.
So for that Iraq deployment, that's where you went to the Al-Assad base?
Correct.
Is that
Iraq?
Yeah,
I was at Al-Assad.
Yeah. How was that for you? Like,
yeah.
Because I can imagine going through corps school and these corpsmen are telling you, you're going to war, you're going to war, you're going to war, right? Yeah. And of course, this is a generation of corpsmen that maybe hasn't really gone to war, right? They've grown up talking about it, and the corpsmen are getting busy, right? They're getting busy at that point in time. And now you're going to Iraq, and it's finally getting to be that time where you're going to be putting hands on a lot of people that are hurt.
Yeah.
Right. How was that stress level for you? Do you remember that experience?
Yeah, it was super high. It was crazy high. I mean, one can't explain it. And stress, it was stress because anytime that you're in a high stress environment. So I was in the surgical company. I was in Al-Assad, and I was attached to Alpha Surgical Company, which was a well fitted surgical company with a lot of capabilities. But I did a lot there. I worked in the trauma bay, and I was also the medevac coordinator. Being the medevac coordinator there, and also kind of switching gears a lot, as was kind of my style, and kind of the way I was kind of stylized by my leadership, is help them out. You're a corpsman, you're aggressive, you're quick on your feet, you're aggressive. So whenever patients would come in and would land on the Blackhawks, from other places, from the shock trauma platoons or even other places, I would help bring them in, and then we help stabilize them and then I would leave and start prepping for the evacuation, whether they needed to go to another echelon of care, like in Baghdad or Balad, or whether they were going to stay with us. So it was just a lot of communication, a lot of aggressive, quick, critical thinking comms, and a lot of pressure what's most visceral, and I don't know if it's me, but I feel like God gave me the ability or helped me really communicate very stressful things, and in a very gritty, visceral way. Bottom line, it's ugly. Blood, pain, suffering is super ugly, and the stress is great. People break little by little. They break a lot, and then we just help each other get each other back together to keep taking care of the guys that are coming in. And that just kept going and going and going, pretty much for the time that I was there, at those 7-8 months.
I mean, that 0304, that's a busy time.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Yeah. And you got
that deployment. I was there from August of 04 to February of 05.
Yeah, man. Busy time. And it was places like, I remember being, we would be out there, Meals on Keels. We'd be out there on the ship supporting, and we would do whatever we could do to support as well, because all these different assets, all supporting the fighters that are in the middle of what they're going through.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine the relief they would feel once they got to where you were at. And yes, they're in pain, but there's also optimism that they're going to get through it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Our brothers, and a lot of my fellow corpsmen who were with the actual ground units, with division units, they're going on patrols. You know, a lot of these guys, once they came to us, they did a lot of the heavy lifting, because they were out there amidst the combat patrols and the actual action. So when Marines and others were injured, the corpsmen there, the line corpsmen, were out there, and of course they did the two big things, which was the on-site stabilization, and many times they were able to get IV access. By the time they came to us, a lot of times that corpsman was still with them. And I mean, the work, the corpsmen are just crazy, courageous people who work on nerve. You know, doctors and nurses are smart. They're the smart people that work in the clinical setting. The corpsman is that crazy person that is trained to go through gunfire, do whatever it takes to save the life of that Marine when all hell is breaking out, and just be with that Marine and say, I'm going to keep you alive no matter what. You're going to go back home. No matter how oblique it looks, that corpsman, that line corpsman that's out there with the Marine. And many times what was very impressive is the fact that they were able to attain IV access. You know, because I know how hard it is to do that whenever there's a lot of movement around, whether they're in that combat situation or whether they're getting loaded on the tactical vehicle or on the bird en route. And by the time they come to us, when that Marine is stabilized and hanging in there, and you see that corpsman just bloody, beaten, sweaty, bruised, jacked up, but they did the best they could on the site, brother, that is just that is the stuff that I will, that I'll be telling stories about as an old man with probably greater clarity.
No, and you got to be proud to be a part of that community, man. I think we all share in the pride in the hospital corpsman community. And you know what I love about the corpsmen, besides, of course, the fact that with the way the Marine Corps reveres them, and the Navy also has love for them, but they're also one of the first rates in the United States Navy, right? That what was it, the apothecary or whatever it was?
It's quite a history. Yeah. Loblolly boys, apothecaries.
Yeah.
We go way back.
I get into that, right? Because the damage patrolmen were the carpenter's mates, and they were one of the first ratings in the Navy. And when I talk to the students,
mates, the gunner's mates, all that.
And understand like the Navy and Marine Corps and how we've evolved from the beginning, right? And how this team was formed from the Revolutionary War, when the Marines were out there being the sharpshooters from the yardarms, or being sleeping in between the crew and the officers so that the crew didn't mutiny, because sailors are scallywags, right? We can go a little sideways once in a while, right? And then we've evolved into this fighting force that does what we do now. I think it's very, very cool, and it's all a part of our genetic code. It's all part of our heritage.
Yeah.
Right. Very cool. When you met Rebecca, so you said you went from Pendleton after Iraq, you then went to overseas?
Naples, Italy for 2 years. I was an ambulance driver at the hospital.
Did you meet her there? Or did you meet her in Southern California?
Well, so she lived here in San Antonio, Texas. She was a friend of my family. She was actually a very good friend of my sister. And so it was kind of a family connection, and kind of a funny story. Actually, I was telling somebody this story today. Everybody loved her. My family loved her. She was a good friend of my sister. My parents knew her, and they were wanting us to hook up. She lived here in San Antonio. So, we had kept in touch throughout the years, like phone calls, emails, and stuff. But I came down one summer of 06 for a wedding, actually, a friend of mine who was getting married in Houston. But I was in San Antonio for a month. And we just really clicked, took our relationship, to a closer level. We spent so much time talking, and then I just felt like I just felt God saying this is the person for you. You should get married, and not just get married, to marry a good woman is gonna be the right person for you. So we made the decision. We took that leap of faith, and we got married in December of 2006. I still had about maybe 6 months left to go in Naples. So I went back to finish that tour as a Geo Bachelor just because there was only 5 months left before her and I went to San Diego together for like the first time living together as a married couple at the School of Health Sciences.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So you were going to be an instructor after Naples?
No, I was actually a student. I went to be a student at preventive medicine school.
Oh, so that's where you got involved in preventive medicine.
Yeah. That's when I became a PMT, which was my permanent rating for the rest of my career. I wanted to switch a kind of a change of scenery, and so I went to preventive medicine school.
Okay, and preventive medicine, just for people that are listening, your job is to help people not get sick, right? So 100%. On the ship, for example, like my job was fire prevention, right? I would do everything in my power to prevent there from being a fire. Yeah, I would fight the fire.
Yeah.
But if I could prevent it from ever happening, that was better. Preventive medicine. So you guys were like checking the water. You guys were the ones making sure the ship was clean the way it was supposed to be clean. Yeah. Is that about right?
100%. No, 100%. Yeah, preventive. So the military preventive medicine is exactly that. It's environmental health, industrial hygiene. It's the galley inspections, making sure that those who are preparing the food are good to go. It's a sanitized environment, healthy environment. They're properly cooking the food. Make sure the water is good to go, because if food is bad or water is bad, people get sick. And the essence of preventive medicine is keep people healthy, because if people get sick, the mission fails. What happens if nobody in the military comes to work to do their job and people are in sick bay? Yeah. So and preventive medicine in the military is so important. Because it's very program centric, food, water testing, epidemiology, the flu vaccines, heat stress program, making sure that working conditions, that people are safe. You know how it goes in the ship. In some of those engineering spaces, it gets super hot. So
it all wears you down. It all wears you down.
Totally.
And your guys' job, I get it. And then look, again, as a damage controlman, my job was ship safety, right? I was shipmate self, but I was really a safety professional to make sure that we were doing toxic gas stuff right. We were doing gas-free engineering was correct, to make sure that everything we were doing was as safe as possible. And I was partnered with the IHO. I would see you doing your dry bulb checks, making sure that they were posted up and doing your thing. And it's because we lived on an industrial environment, right? Like a ship is a big industrial environment.
Totally.
I took the cadets up to Jacksonville, to Mayport, the Navy base, and there is a mosquito lab there that basically studies all the different bugs and insects in the world and the disease that can bring. And they were teaching us about how the corpsmen there help them do all their jobs, and how important it is to prevent infestations from taking out, imagine being in the swamp, right? And you got a whole bunch of bugs.
Yeah. Pest control and entomology are actually sections of the Prev Med curriculum. 100%. Yeah. You got to keep people from getting bitten and stung by bad critters. 100%.
And it's a mental health thing, right? Because you can only deal with it so long before you go freaking crazy, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
You're gonna go nuts. So is it after that Prev Med school that you went to the GW?
Well, I had one tour before the GW. It was at the Naval Hospital, Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
So I was there for 3.5 years. During those 3.5 years there, in the middle of that tour, that's when I went to be an IA, an individual augmentee in Afghanistan. And I was in Afghanistan for about 8 months in the middle of that Jacksonville tour.
I saw that. Did you volunteer for the IA, or did they pick you?
I think it was more they picked me. It was kind of both. Yeah, because it was weird. They always they would solicit and they would offer, and then to be frank, there was some folks that would come up with creative reasons as to why they shouldn't or couldn't go. I raised my hand. Yeah, send me. I mean, I'll go. And Naya. And I volunteered, and Naya had just been born. Naya was when I left Afghanistan, I missed Naya's first birthday. Naya's my oldest. She was like 8 months when I left. I'll just say this, that Afghanistan deployment, I'll just say this about that deployment. It was probably, you know, I look at my career and I look at my best performances and my kind of my worst performances, so to say, if that makes sense. And I'll probably say that was probably the best performance of my career. Those 8 months in Afghanistan, along with 1 year on the GW. But the third happiest day of my life was after getting married and after getting married, the girls being born, and the day I came home from that deployment. That one was kind of rough. That one was pretty rough.
So on that deployment, were you going as a Prev-Med tech or were you going as a corpsman?
I was functioning as a PMT. I was functioning as a PMT. What was crazy about that one was because I was tagged with a partner of mine whom I still am in good touch with to this day. He's still active duty, actually. He's the chief. And actually, no, he's the senior chief now. And we were outside the wire a lot, flying everywhere, convoying everywhere.
Right.
And I was doing a lot of different duties. So it was just a lot of work that we did. And it was a lot of danger that we were exposed to all over the place, you know, fob hopping, because we were literally traveling from fob to fob, collecting samples and doing stuff. So it was pretty interesting.
That was a tough time in Afghanistan though, man, because what year was that?
It was 2009.
That's what I thought.
It was the initial Helmand Province push. Remember, President Obama gets elected and he refocuses on Afghanistan. So it was from April to November of 2009.
Yep.
And that whole Helmand Province push, it was kind of an interesting environment because what was happening at the time was that it was actually, in many ways, it was kind of a drug war, you know, because it was a lot of DEA. I remember I was doing so many different things.
Poppy seeds, man.
There was stuff, and I actually worked at the Centrix for a couple of weeks as a break. It really wasn't a break because I was monitoring a lot of chatter. And there was a lot of agencies out there doing agency type work, DEA, CIA type stuff, and really trying to find opium caches along with other weapons and things out there. Yeah. And that was a really kind of eye-opening environment because there was just a lot going on down in Helmand Province on top of the regular work that we were doing.
I agree. And I would tell you that was a tough time because the war had been raging for quite a while. Bush was no longer the president.
Yeah.
Right. The rules of engagement were no longer the same. And the enemy was not the same either.
Totally.
Right. And they had gotten smart from years of insurgencies in Iraq and wherever else. And it was a challenge, right? And the country had moved on, it felt like. America had moved on, but we still had boots on the ground in Afghanistan. But it was also a lot more united. So I have a buddy of mine, real good friend of mine, who was Navy, was a DC. He was a DC-1 and then went Army and he did Iraq. 2 tours in Iraq as Army.
Yeah.
Then he went Special Forces in Army, and he went to Afghanistan. He hated everything about Afghanistan about that same time you went because of how political it was, and the missions were so not what we thought we were there for.
Yeah.
Right. And then it was just so I can understand how that was a tough one, man.
It's tough.
And it was hard to get out of there, right? It wasn't until the last presidential run that we actually just finally extracted everybody, right? It was almost like it was just horrible. Yeah, so I get that. I remember the IAs, and I had mixed feelings on IAs. I'm not even gonna lie to you, bro, because here I am, a damage controlman who is trained to be a shipboard firefighter, never missed an underway, never missed a deployment. But now people are trying to convince me to volunteer to go drive trucks and be a convoy driver, right? Because I'm not like Corpsman. Corpsman, your guys' job would apply, right? But the regular sailor was getting IA to go stand brig duty or guard duty or whatever it is. And it's just like, what are we doing? But and it changed the Navy. It changed the Navy because when a lot of guys came back to the regular fleet, they didn't know how to act. It was almost like the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps did all those years of Iraq, Afghanistan, and then they put back on the ships. They were like, "This sucks. I don't want to be on a ship."
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and to your point, I think that was the argument. I think a lot of folks felt that it wasn't the most efficient use of talent and resources. If folks, I think there's something, that's where the schools of thought came into play, right? I came into the Navy. I remember being trained kind of like you, coming up a certain culture. And you got to stretch yourself, and you got to be a master of all and none. Whereas other folks, the other school thought, hey, make sure that people are doing the job they were trained to do. Don't be inefficient. So I think that's what we saw a lot of the conflicts.
It was interesting, man. I think that the longer I've been around the military, the higher up I got, the more I was able to see how we are one team. And I think the communication, the way they communicated it, was not the most effective, right?
Yeah.
And they weren't leveraging the years of experience. They were just, do you want to go volunteer because it's going to be a good career incentive, right? And for me, that was the wrong method, right?
Yeah.
Right, my career is my career. But there was a good stretch where, remember, they turned IA into GSA tours.
Yeah.
And it was now incorporated into your rotation, right? And it was, I remember being a first class petty officer and being told that if I wanted to make chief, I needed to do an IA. I was just like, well, I guess I'm not making chief because I'm just not, like, at the end of the day. And by the way, I'm talking like later on in my career, I was very proud to be a sailor, but I joined the United States Navy for a reason, right? I wanted to be on the ships and to do my thing. No problem putting my life on the line for a shipmate. No problem doing the dangerous thing. But I wasn't quite sure that I trusted what the real needs were at the time, if that made sense.
Yeah.
And I felt like promotion wasn't worth it for me. I mean, I always made a commitment to my wife that they'd have to ask me. I wasn't going to just I would never choose to go GEO back, for example, right? Because and she always went with me overseas. On every one of our overseas tours, she went because we committed to be a family. And I remember when she left, when I was leaving GW, she left. They upheld me on the George Washington. They wouldn't let me go, that damn ship. Yeah. I love the GW for a lot of reasons, but it was a tough one, right? And he left about 3 months before I did. That was a hard 3 months, just 3 months. I couldn't imagine the GBs that do 24 months, right? That's a long time, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So you come back from Afghanistan. You've got your daughter now. She's a year old. You guys are in Jacksonville. Why do you decide to go to the GW or to Japan?
Yeah.
Like, is that not, so Jacksonville's not deployable duty, even though you just deployed?
Yeah, no, it was shore duty. It was shore duty. It was nice shore duty because, sunny Jacksonville, Florida, it was great. But I was up for sea duty at the time, and I was still second class. I would later make first class as soon as I got to the GW, but I wanted to make chief I wanted to set myself in what I was being told. Two reasons. I always wanted to go to a ship. I always wanted to be ship's company. I want to go and get my surface warfare and an air warfare device, and I feel that a carrier is the best way to do it. So, funny story. I remember sitting in that office in Jacksonville, Florida, talking to the detailer on the phone. Even as I always call the detailers directly, and I'm talking to him, and I said, "Hey man, we're talking." And I said, "Hey man, I really want to go ship." He's like, "Hey, guess what, man? I got a bill for I got a bill for the George Washington right now, second class H-2 bill." He's like, "I'll give it to you right now if you want. I'll start writing the orders." I said, "Tell you what, give me 1 minute, give me a minute and a half. Let me call my wife, get her blessing, and I promise after I hang up with her, I'll call you back right now." Okay, right. All right, copy that. No, I love it, So I hang up my call back. "Hey, babe." She's working at a Bank of America in Jacksonville. "Hey, real quick, you got to give me a yes or no, whatever you want to say. But he's offering for us to go to Yokosuka, Japan, build on the ship." And she's all about it. I can hear the excitement. Yes. Okay, copy that. Love you. Bye. I called him up, and then that is how I got to the George Washington. Yeah. And I love it, but I really wanted to go. I wanted to go to the GW. Yeah. I wanted to experience the Navy. I was like, hey, I love my FMF brothers and sisters, but I want to go to a ship.
In World War II, the United States Navy had almost 3.5 million people in it, right? That's how big the Navy was. I was teaching them the lesson and talk about, we drew down from 3.5 million to under 800,000 in under a year after World War II. So the Navy's never gotten back to what it was World War II, right? Because if you think about that generation, there was a lot of sailors in that greatest generation, right? Because the Navy there was a lot of ships, there was a lot of things going on. It's huge, and there's a lot of pride. I have a lot of pride in being in the Navy, right? I love being a blue-green sailor. I love being an amphib sailor. But why I wanted to go to the carrier was I kind of wanted to go to a ship that was 100% Navy, right? And not have, because I was always on Gators and working with the Marines, but we were like, our main mission was to the Marines, right? Take care of the Marines, get the Marines where they had to go. And I never got the chance to be like on a destroyer or a cruiser. And so, but like you, I wanted opportunity to show that I was also ready for the next level. And I kind of wanted, I want to be on an aircraft carrier. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like that was just sexy to me, right? Highway to the danger zone, right? Go up there on the flight deck and all that. And like you, my first tour was in Japan, so I felt that pain of being a young person in Japan with no car.
This time I got a car.
This time I was gonna get a house on base. I wasn't gonna be living on the ship.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna have a car. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be okay. And my wife was super nervous about going to Japan. When did you get there? What month did you get there?
Yeah, we got there. Rebecca and I got there in September of 2011. Yeah, we got there September 2011, and it was a few months after the whole earthquake.
So you missed the earthquake. I was gonna ask you about
we missed the earthquake. We missed the earthquake. But yeah, we got there, and Gary, I mean, the 3 years on the GW were definitely the most challenging in my career. There were times in that medical berthing and that prep med office, I'll tell you, we had a bathroom next to there, and there were so many times where I would go in there for just 30 seconds and get on a knee because I was breaking in every way. I mean, I gave it 120% on that ship of everything, but I felt the energy of the ship. I felt the commitment, the intensity. It's just such an intense environment, but it was the most difficult tour of my career, but also the most rewarding. And I loved the personalities and the characters that I worked with, and not just in medical, but the whole ship. I mean, I was having every day was like a cool soap opera, just all, because I get there, and again, I don't know the blue side life, so I'm learning about the 3M program and all the different departments, and I mean, it was just.
And you came after the earthquake, right?
Yes.
I will tell you, I got to the ship January of 2010.
Yeah.
Right. So I was on the ship for a year before the earthquake, and we had we did like 7 months underway straight without going home.
Yeah.
And we were driving around Yokosuka.
Yeah.
We could have pulled in, bro.
I heard the stories. I know. I heard what I missed. I heard the stories when I came over.
So then we had the earthquake and all that. We were stressed. We were taxed, right? And then when you got there after the earthquake, so many things had changed because of all the rules. And like we were having to, it was just a lot that had changed after that earthquake period of time. And then of course that op tempo was crazy still, right? Crazy. It never slows down. Right, we're either in the yard period or we're underway operational.
Yeah,
I used to love. So medical was right across from my office. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember. Yeah, of course. Yeah. You guys were my DC. You are our neighbors, our next door. Yeah. I feel like yelling, "Hey, you got any milk over there?" But
damn near. It really was, bro. It really was.
Yeah.
I did. What I loved about that ship was just again, like you said, the camaraderie, the people. I love being underway, the mission. But I felt like we would never get settled at home, right? But during the yard periods, it wasn't that bad. And living on the ship on duty days in the yards was kind of crappy. Remember how cold that was?
I remember that, those cold duty days of it was because we were always in the yards from like December to like
always
April, and it got really warm until like April, right?
Yeah, and we're getting ready to leave. Yeah, Mother's Day, we're leaving.
Yeah, we really only got to enjoy like a month and a half of spring. So
yeah. It was there was a lot to that tour that, of course, I mean, I love the ship.
We could dedicate an entire episode just on the GW.
Really, you could. So after getting ready to leave the Georgia, so was your second daughter born before Japan?
She was born in Japan. She was born at the Naval Hospital there in January 2013, right in the middle of my tour there. She was born in. It was a blessing. It was a cool situation because she was born. I was able to spend the last couple of months of Rebecca's pregnancy with her because we had just pulled in a couple months prior. And then she was born. And then like after she was born, I got to spend like first 3 months of her life with her before we took off again. So the timing was good.
Nice. Getting to the end of the George Washington, that's a deployable duty. That's sea duty for you. Now you got 2 kids. You got the wife. You're a first class petty officer at this time. What are you thinking about doing now at that point?
Yeah. So the GW, my performance in the GW, getting the warfare devices and just having a good tour there. I feel like there was good things that happened, for my career, for my family there. That's really kind of that is what set the stage for me to eventually make chief, which I did in my next command.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in the GW. I'm up for orders. A NEPMU 7, which is a small preventive expeditionary medical command in Rota, Spain, just opened up, which is an incredibly exotic, desirable duty station, Rota, Spain. So I remember applying for that billet and getting it, and just being being ecstatic that I got that assignment. So we ended up leaving in October of 2014. That's when I left the GW, and we went to Spain.
Very cool, man. Talk about an opportunity. I never got to go to Europe. I always wanted to do Europe. After GW, I was almost ready to retire. It almost killed me.
Yeah.
Right. So I went to shore duty after that. I needed a knee. But to go to Rota, Spain, that's huge.
It was. Greg and I joke around. We say, when we think about our time in Rota, Spain, our blood pressure just starts to lower and drop. All we got to do, our personal medicine, is just start talking about our time in Rota, because the lifestyle, the European Spanish lifestyle, is so laid back. But I'll tell you, I struggled when I first got to the command, because I had too much of the GW in me. That operational tempo, that restlessness, it was when I first, and then I go from an aircraft carrier of 5,000 souls on board with a kind of op tempo in the 7th Fleet to a command in an exotic, sleepy location like Spain with 15 people in a small command. And we did great work. I mean, it was a very unique command that I went in terms of what we did and how we did it. But it was also laid back in many ways, because we had to blend in with the Spanish culture, which is very relaxed and very diplomatic in many ways. So I really struggled. It took me a few months to kind of learn to relax. There were conversations between me and other leaders. Hey, Dave, you're not in the GW anymore. And those are real lessons. Hey, you need to, out here, you need to be mindful of your approach. I know you came from an aircraft carrier, but guess what? You're not on the carrier anymore. You need to kind of be mindful and have a little bit of self-awareness in terms of how I came off with other sailors. And they were right. I needed to make that transition. So I definitely got good advice.
I can relate. We all can relate. I think that I had that same conversation at my instructor duty. I had the same conversation with myself when I retired, right? And I almost have
those conversations are ongoing.
Well, again, you've been wired. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know I am exactly who they trained me to be. And I let myself be trained. Like, I was there for it, right? Because I said I commit myself to this thing. I wanted to go as far as possible. And part of that was keeping up with everything.
Yes.
And where I would struggle, and this is just being honest with you, is when I felt like vows were broken or not kept, then I really struggled, though.
Yeah.
Because then I would be like, look at all the sacrifice, look at all the blood, sweat, and tears, and now you're going to tell me that we don't play by the rules? That does not compute, And so having to unwind a lot of that when I was retiring was real therapeutic. And I'm very thankful I got the chance to change rates and to do something different for my last few years in the Navy. Because I think if I would have walked away after the GW, I don't know how life would have gone. I needed some time to deprogram and get a little more focused on like people than, because like on GW, I was a monster, right? You had a problem with the DC, man, you can expect a short ball-headed dude coming through your door. Like I was hard because it felt like there was so much to get done. And the only way you could win was to like bowl in China shop sometimes because it was tough. Right. It was, so I could see you having to have those challenges and going back to pretty much a whole medical community. Right.
Yes.
And so I left the George Washington, went to a whole engineering school, right, where I was the senior enlisted leader, and there's nothing but engineers.
Yeah.
I really missed the diversity of the ship because I needed that Airedale to say something or the CS to say something. I loved having the different perspectives by just a bunch of engineers that all had groupthink or whatever that was. And so I could see we're going back to the medical community where a lot of this stuff is already programmed in, it's already baked in, and you got to figure out how you fit into the swim lanes, right? And here you come in as a hot run in first class off a strong tour, right? But you're also, I mean, I have a feeling there's a part of you that is wanting to be a team player, but you're also hope if you don't make chief that year, what's next? Right? How do I continue to move forward? And there's other first classes like, whoa, slow down, man. You just got here, right?
Yeah.
I've been there too,
Yeah.
right? And I've counseled many a first class petty officer on that challenging time, especially corpsman, because your guys' rate is so diverse and so big. There's not just one way to make chief as a hospital corpsman.
Yeah.
There's like 1,000.
And to that point, it was that transition was very eye opening because I think there was a skill set that was developed, just like the GW really forged some strength more than ever before. Rota Spain was a different command. It was very cerebral, very complex because the environment that we were in European command, the nature of our command, we had a very polished OIC, and a big part of that command, because it was a new command that had just been recently established, we had to learn how to get along with other commands, and they had to know who we were in order to service them as a technical provider for certain missions, combatant commands in EUCOM and AFRICOM. So I had to learn how to be diplomatic, and corpsmen naturally have to be diplomatic. They have to have that part of their mind trained because of the clinical settings that we have to operate in, working with doctors, nurses, surgeons, Navy medicine. Right? But being there, it's when it was very eye opening because that's when it became very apparent that people do have different personalities. And even leaders do have different preferences. You know, I lost a lot of naivety, and I became very realistic about how, well, you can be kicking butt in some place and they may love you, but that doesn't mean that they're going to like that style everywhere you go, because some leaders just have different personalities. They have different preferences. And that's when it became very apparent in Rota that it was just different than the GW. And it's really nobody's fault, because the GW, my chain of command GW were good to go. Rota Spain, OIC, the SCL, they were also good to go. They all had very unique, good skill sets, but they were just different environments. So that's when I just really had to upskill and just really elevate my thinking about a lot of things and take it to another level. And I think that was really important in preparation for making chief.
Well, and that's emotional intelligence, right? It's recognizing what's going on in the situation where you're at, and not to say that they're the enemy, but in my opinion, the enemy gets a vote, right? So the other people in the room get a vote in what's going to happen here. If you're just a one size fits all person, you're probably not going to be a good team player.
Totally.
And so, and unfortunately, I am a competitive person by nature, and so when I look at other people, I'm like, okay, they're my competition. Okay, they're not my competition, but they feel like they're my competition.
Yeah,
because we're all trying to be leaders, right?
Yeah.
And when going through Chiefs initiation, that was really where I learned how to. I tell this to sailors or to people that make chief is when I was a first class petty officer, I was taking every opportunity there was. Right, I was taking them all. When I made chief, I learned to look to my right or to my left and say, hey, do y'all see that opportunity? Yeah. Does anybody else want that opportunity? Because I can help you, but I don't need to take it.
Yeah.
Unless I really want it, then I'll just take it.
Yeah.
Unless I really want it. And that's, I made senior chief, right? I'll take it then.
Yeah.
But in the Chiefs mess, it was more about the collective, which is something I really bought into when I went through initiation. I tell people I was initiated to my first organization when I was 12 years old, right? So I was a little thug running around with my group of people, and I love being a part of a team, right?
Yeah.
I love that. So the Chiefs mess was that was my conclusion, right? I would never, but I bought into what they were selling through the initiation process, because before I made chief, I didn't even know what that thing was. Like, I had no clue they did initiation. I wasn't paying attention to their stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to make chief, to be honest. I took the test for LDO purposes, right? Like, I don't know. And so now I'm going through this initiation. Like, why y'all yelling at me all the time?
Right.
I thought we were friends. I thought we were good.
Why are you being mean to me? Right.
It did. And then throughout the years, I would tell the new selectees, like, look, you're about to go through something that most adults do not put themselves through. And you're going to have the opportunity to either just not care and get through it, or you might be able to hit some cool milestones or break some ceilings you didn't even see coming, as long as you trust in the process.
Mm-hmm.
now I know not every mess is the same, and I know not everyone's going to
Yeah.
do for their people. Like I know what I always did for my people. Every one of my initiations, I made sure was they got their money's worth.
Yeah.
They got what they came for, right? They're going to walk in any Chiefs mess and anywhere in the world and sit down and have a cup of coffee and be like, I live here. This is my
Yeah.
mess,
Yeah.
right? No
Yeah.
problem. How was your initiation in Rhoda?
It was, I'd give it on a scale from 1 to 10. I think I'd give it a 10, and I say that because, I've been around. After I made chief in 2015, and I retired in 2022. I've been around 6-7 initiations, but I saw some in Rhoda, I saw some Diego Garcia, and then I also saw some in Fort Sam, Houston. So I've seen initiations in 3 different commands. But I think the group of personalities that were there at that time when I went there, one of whom was the retired Force Master Chief of the CB community, Del Terrell, right? He was the acting CMC at the time there, and then there was Shannon Dittlinger, who was a Master Chief of the hospital. My SEL was Bill Hayden, who was the SEL of NEPU 7. So the group of personalities that were there, not just the leadership, but all over the place. I thought it was just a very impressive group of characters and personalities. Yeah. And I think that's what makes an initiation exciting, is when you have really interesting characters and personalities there. And I guess I brought it. I really brought it. I always, and I really can't read other people's minds in terms of how they truly feel about me, right? Or in terms of how my performance was. But I do feel with all my heart that there might have been a good reaction, a good feeling overall, a mutual feeling, because I felt that way. I really am. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was fun. I enjoyed the beatings. Now, I was always a physical guy. So, again, strengths and weaknesses, what I could never bring to the table, I didn't worry about what I couldn't bring. All I knew is this is what I can do and I can bring it. And I always brought the intensity and the physicality. And I was a heck of a cadence singer. I always want to write. Oh man, I read. They said that when I sang cadence, I gave them goosebumps. I guess that's a good thing. I always say, hey, if you can give people goosebumps, then that's a good thing, right? But Gary, no, but it was great, and it all came down to the people, the personalities. Yeah. They brought the intensity into the season, and I enjoyed every second of it. I love getting beat. I love the feeling of getting beat and getting pushed beyond the limit. The feeling of getting exhausted, of being exhausted, just pushing forward.
Well, I would tell you FDNF or for overseas in particular, right? Because I was at Naval Base Guam for my last duty station, and I got the chance to be the base master chief, and so to run the initiation process there. There's something about living abroad in a community where you don't worry about the commute, right?
And
we're all local.
Yeah.
And you're going to get a lot more advice. When I was doing initiations like in Norfolk or when I was doing them in San Diego, it's a little harder, right? Because people are commuting an hour and a half in. And it's just different. So
I think, Gary, to that point, Gary, I think you're 100%. That's another thing too, is the families were really tight out there. It was overseas, and it was a very, again, the location was very exotic. It was fun. It was Rhoda, Spain, so the family is really tight. I think that my wife and my daughters had a big part of my success because people really seemed to like them a lot, especially my wife, the families were really cool. So I was just blessed to be around a lot of really cool people.
Yep. So after NEPU 7, is that when you go to DG?
Correct. Yeah, I left NEPU 7 in 2017. Then I went to DGAR for about 14 months. So
how was that conversation with Rebecca? Because that's a guaranteed Geo badge tour. Was that where you just slam with those orders, or was there a strategy there?
Yeah, there was a hope and a strategy. The hope was that if I took that assignment, the way it was pitched at the time from the detailer and other folks was that, and actually these are his exact words, the detailer, hey, you take this billet, which nobody wants to take, you take it, I guarantee you get whatever you want afterwards, whatever you want. Exact words. And I said, Roger that. Let me go out there and I'll do it 14 months. Now, I never worried about Rebecca because Rebecca was that much of a trooper. Do what you got to do. She made life so easy for me and as a decision maker for my career. She, which meant that when we left Rhoda, she ended up going back to San Antonio with both of the girls to stay there while I was in Diego Garcia. She could have technically stayed in Rhoda, and we could have figured out what we were going to do afterwards. But she wanted to come back to San Antonio because she wanted to kind of reconnect with her family. Her father had just passed about a year prior from cancer, so there was motives for going back to San Antonio. So the offer, getting whatever you want afterwards, I took it seriously, and I go to the DGAR. Right. Well, sure enough, that detailer is no longer there. I don't know what I'm thinking. Okay, I thought part of me is like, oh, you're going to be here forever. Maybe you're going to talk to somebody afterwards. However, nonetheless, I go to the DGAR, and it's a good tour because while I'm there, it's some professional wins. I finally get my bachelor's degree, and I went to SCA. But 3 billets for Fort Sam Houston opened up, which was wow. I was so excited because I'm coming back home to San Antonio. That opens up a lot of opportunity. So I was very happy about that. So when I put in for Fort Sam, I was able to come back to San Antonio after DGAR.
Okay. And so when you come back to Fort Sam Houston, that's what's going on down there? Is that a schoolhouse?
Instructor. Yeah. I was a preventive medicine instructor. I came back where it started.
Okay. So you were a PMT instructor down there. And did you know when you went to Fort Sam Houston that you were going to retire?
No. I was like a lot of guys, Gary. The goal for first class is to make chief, and then when you're chief, you want to make senior chief. I had my goals were to go as high as the Navy could take me. Those were my goals, right? But the ultimate goal was to make master chief, and then who knows what. That was the goal. But kind of make a really complex long story. I'm going to make it super short. Got there in 2019. Command was great leaders, great command. They were taking care of me and I was doing my thing. But COVID happened. And when COVID happened, a lot of my friends know about this because I put it out there on Facebook. Bottom line is that I was actually in the best shape of my career at some point in Fort Sam because I was going to be leading PT for the season, right? And training super hard. But then we all started getting sick as a family from COVID. My wife got sick. My dad got sick. Everybody got sick. Well, on a Wednesday, I got super sick. I went from being 100 and some odd pounds of pure muscle to like getting emaciated. That was the degree of the COVID infection and the pneumonia. Lost a lot of weight, got super sick, and I had been sick for a long time. It was looking kind of rough. I told Rebecca on a Tuesday, I need you to take me to the hospital tomorrow because I need a chest x-ray and I need some stronger medication, this symptomatics, because I can't deal with this anymore. The cough will not go away. During that time, my dad has been hospitalized for almost a week and a half and nobody can see him. And he's probably not going to make it as all this is going on with me. And I go to hospital on Wednesday, get admitted, get diagnosed with pneumonia. They discharged me on Thursday, and then my dad died on Friday. All that happened within 4 days. And I told this story to people because it was the worst part of my life. To this day, nothing will compare. That was hell. That was beyond hell because I was losing my dad. And I was so sick. I was kind of like in a psychedelic state, if that makes sense. I like, what is happening to my body? That was the full force of the COVID and pneumonia on me.
Yeah.
But I tell this story to people. I said on that Thursday morning when I woke up, I remember saying a prayer, and it was the ugliest hole in my life because I had a conversation with my mom, and it was when it was going to be evident that my dad wasn't going to make it. He did die the next day. And she broke down, and here I am. And I feel like I don't have the emotional or physical energy to feel sad. That's how tapped out I am. Yet I'm going to lose my dad, and I'm not going to be able to see him. Right. Yeah. So I hang up on mom and I say a prayer. And I remember saying this prayer, and I said, God, what I'm going through right now, I said, don't let it get wasted. How can this make me a better person, a patient, more wiser, kinder person? Help me do that. And the craziest thing is that in that darkest hole, I still felt incredible peace, if that makes sense. I can't describe it. It was like I felt something holding me, telling me it's going to be okay. If you can hang through this, son, you can hang through anything. You're all right. I got you. You'll be all right. You're going to make it. Right. And then in the days and weeks that followed after that, after conversations with family, friends, and the internal medicine, the docs who were evaluating me, the inflammation and swelling of my heart and lungs was so significant that there were conversations. And that's ultimately when I decided to put my fleet reserve in, and decided to go ahead and retire. I mean, there was a lot, it was a lot of thought and conversation, but, and I was healing up, but it was just a really bad infection. But I said, you know what? I'm alive. I can walk and talk. We still have mom, and it was in COVID. You know, a lot of us are just real fuzzy in so many ways. So that's when I decided to retire, and then I retired about a year and a half later. So I was able to dedicate that year and a half to kind of prepping for my retirement, because there was a lot of medical stuff that I needed to be following up with as well.
I will tell you what, that my dad died in 2019, right before COVID. My mom died in 2018, right? And so my parents did not get to see me retire. They did not get to see life after the military service, right? And I'd always told them there was this optimism for a life after the service, right? I'm sure it gave your mom a little bit of peace knowing you were going to be close to home as she was figuring out this new normal of life without your dad, right? And of course your sisters, and I'm sure it gave your wife some peace to know, okay, he's not leaving anymore. We're already set up here. We're already stabilized. The girls are good. And oh, by the way, you just got wrecked by this freaking evil that attacked our world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was in you, and it thank God I let you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was probably scary for a lot of reasons. So there's never an easy time to say I'm walking away from the service, right? Because unfortunately, I've seen very few people leave on happy terms, right? Most of them behind closed doors are salty about one thing or the other, right? There's something didn't go the way they wanted, or they didn't get the thing, or whatever it was. And so what I've learned from that is it's just bittersweet, right? To transition to this next thing of life. But when you know, right? When you know, man. I knew my wife wanted me to stay in the Navy longer, and I was like, no, I'm done. Like I can't do it anymore. I have got to do something else. But I also felt like God was in a way guiding me to move on. The other thing though was, and this is not even a faith-based thing. This is just a reality thing. If we could have stayed in the United States Armed Forces till we were 65, as long as our health and our bodies were good, probably be a different conversation. But they're telling you there's a drop dead time if you don't make rank, or if you don't get this or don't get that, and you got to go kick rocks no matter what. So then at some point you do want to take a little bit of control, because your family relies upon you to be the one that's going to make a determination, right? And I think that's where the military, if they really wanted to retain some of the best, they might get rid of that high-year tenure requirement, period. As long as people are doing great at the job and they're fully functioning and all the other things. Because you look at law enforcement, you look at fire, they don't just kick people out. They offer them the chance to retire, but they continue to serve as long as their bodies are willing. Because I'll tell you what, once I realized, like, okay, 50 is coming no matter what. Well, 45 is as good of age as any to punch out and go do something else, right? And oh, by the way, you have to start over again in this whole other phase of life. And, unwind it all, right? What was your transition like for you? I mean, and I also I retired in 2022. So, but all of my stuff was 2021, still coming out of COVID. What year did you actually retire?
It was in 2022.
Okay. So how was your retirement transition? Was it, I mean, are you still in the same house you lived in before you retired?
No. So when we were living so we moved this year. We actually built a new home this year, which I'm currently in right now. So there were a lot of big moves, but the transition itself, I think that the decision to submit the Fleet Reserve around the summer and early fall, which was technically about a year and a half from closer to 2 years from my actual official retirement day. I was within that 2 year mark, right? Because I submitted it like in late September. My official EAOS was August 1st, so I was within 2 years. But when I did it, and it got approved pretty quickly, because I think a lot of people understood my situation. After that, the transition was pretty smooth, actually, because and the good thing was that Fort Sam Houston, it was instructor command, but it was short command, instructor command. So there was, as long as the instructor, I did my job, in terms of being on the podium whenever I needed to teach. But whenever I was on the podium, the chain of command was very supportive in terms of allowing me to transition, which of course consisted of all the administrative and the medical appointments, that one goes on and does. So overall, the transition was very good. And not just practically speaking from all the, checks in the box that one does, the skill bridges, the TAPS classes, all those things that one does, but also like on a real physical, emotional level. getting to kind of slowly transition away, and the chain of command was great, and I think there was kind of a culture, an overall back and forth culture between everybody, whereby when people want to be treated people want to treat others as they want to be treated, right? So
right.
when somebody was fixing their tire, it's like, hey, bro, show some love, man. Show some love to everybody retired, because when we retire, we want the same love show to us. We've all heard stories, right, of some folks transitioning from some places and it just being really rough. So whenever somebody was getting out, we as the command always try to rally and try to make it for that person and their family as a healthy and as a peaceful as transition as possible.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad to hear you got that. So as we get ready to land this thing, right? What are you up to now, life post military service? And now it's 2025. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
Are you fully on the other side now? How is that looking for you?
I don't know. I think I have unfinished business with the Navy. I say that I think that I look back and I start to think that, I still got a lot to offer and give. So I did a couple of jobs when I got out, a couple of things, couple of interesting jobs, right? But the biggest thing I'm doing now is literally I just took a big leap in faith, and I finished a master's in public policy earlier this year from Liberty University. I was always interested in the political and policy arena, right? I'm not a political guy by nature, but I do believe that when it comes to politics, there's a saying: a person may not show interest in politics, but politics is going to show interest in them. It's going to come get you. So I think that's why I just kind of say it to people whenever they say, I don't want to deal with it. I understand that, but I did that for a year. But now what I'm doing is I have a website and LLC called Dave's Transmissions. And I'm essentially, I do two things. I write, I post a lot. I do a lot of written articles on 6 topic areas, which are national security, economic opportunity, health affairs, education, history, and science, all of which I'm a major stakeholder in, just because I like all 3. And we're very intersectional people, whether we admit or not, as military personnel, because we're husbands, we're fathers, we're service members, we're invested in national security, we're invested in education as fathers and husbands. So we really are interconnected. Well, all those topic areas are something that I have I have a lot of skin in each one of those things, in which one of those. So I write on them, and I do a lot of very similar to kind of what you're doing, engaging conversations through different digital and technological platforms. And just started it, within the last month. So I'm really just kind of seeing where it goes from here. I do want to contribute to it. There's other publications that I'm reaching out to start my contributions to other publications that are very kind of like-minded to kind of my philosophy. But yeah, that's what I'm doing now. And just God willing that, it goes well in the weeks, the months and years to come.
Exciting, man. I will tell you that it's just, I love anything creative. I think it's a good thing. Yeah. I believe God put us on this earth to create, right? There's this guy named Myron Golden. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before or not. Yeah. He's on YouTube, right? He's a finance guy, but I love him because he's a creative guy. And he talks about how God created us in his image. And one of God's greatest things he ever did was to create man, right? Like God was so proud he created us in his own image.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're created in God's image, then we need to create. If we're not going to be happy, if we're not creating, and you're going to struggle. Now we all create in our own way.
Yeah.
Right. This has become my creative outlet, but my creative outlet is also just feeding into people.
Yeah.
Right. I love helping people identify talents and figure out how to get the best out of them to accomplish whatever mission it is they want to accomplish. When it was in the Navy, I would be able to align that with the Navy's goals so we could get the job done as well as meet your own personal goals. But then in life, it's just figuring out, well, what do you want to do in life? And let's best shape that. Let's refine it down to make it actionable and then go forward, right? So if you're feeling a call to create something, I think you have to walk that way because God's calling you to operate in that space. And then, oh, by the way, the blessings will begin to come in because the law of attraction is going to be, it's a part of the conversation too, right?
Absolutely.
I'm a little eclectic in my beliefs. I'm open to a lot. I like to watch a lot of the ancient alien stuff too. I'm not going to lie. I'm interested in the whole thing, right? All right, David. Hey man, as we wrap this up, I'm going to shoot you some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And you don't need to overthink them. Just do your best to send back what you got, okay?
Totally. Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. What do you think is the biggest leadership challenge you see in the world today?
Distraction and overstimulation from so many sources from all over the place.
Distraction and overstimulation. So then I guess in response to that, then the advice you would give to leaders then would be to help limit distractions and limit stimulation to the people.
Well, I don't know what the answer is. It's a great question. I think that's the issue, but I think that leaders need to prioritize. They need to really dig deep and understand what's most important and prioritize that. I see that in the political arena. I think that a lot of people do a lot of things instead of leading and serving the people that they're entrusted to serve. They do a lot of things just to kind of amp their profile and their image versus fulfilling their responsibilities. And I think that's because they're distracted. I think that we only have so much bandwidth to do to our jobs, but today's world, right? There's just so much coming all over the place. And a lot of the things that are coming are good. They're not bad things, but we just have to, I think we as leaders just need to be careful, in terms of what's coming in.
And to your point, man, leaders chose to be in the arena. Part of that leadership thing is to refine priorities.
Yes, sir.
And if you're not willing to pick a priority, you're not the leader for the job. You're not the one for the position, right? I remember asking the chief engineer on the.
I struggle with that, Gary. I'm just in full candor because I struggle with that.
Yeah. But you know what? You got to have tools then to do it for yourself, even, right? Whether it's like one of my favorite things to do is I'll write it all down. When I have a bunch of competing priorities, I'll write them all down and I'll rack and stack them from the easiest wins on top to the hardest wins on the bottom. And I'll start aligning my priorities towards the quick wins because I want to get momentum going again. And I want to start gaining production while I really second guess how serious am I in accomplishing these longer term goals, because I know there's going to be a price to pay, right? There's going to be a cost I got to pay if it's all going to be a thing. But as a leader, as a dad, as a husband, as a man, as a whatever, part of our job, like you said, is to help synthesize the overwhelming amount of things coming at us to identify what are the main areas to go after, right? And and that's just it. And what's awesome though is when you're able to teach your children, to teach your team members to help you with that. So I've been a high school ROTC instructor. This is my 4th year. So my first year freshmen from my first year are now seniors this year. Brother, it's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
They are phenomenal, right? It's like throwing red meat to the wolves. You think about getting 4 years with people, bro.
Yeah.
We never got that in the service. You might get 18 months with somebody.
Yeah.
Someone's leaving. I got 4 years with these kids. They're so dialed in, man, that today, they literally erased all of the goals on the board and rewrote it all in order of priority. And I'm just like, you guys
that's awesome.
Right? But that's the training value that leaders can offer to people to give them tools to find what works for them, because ultimately it's just finding the right tool, right? Yeah. All you need is the right tool. I don't believe we can have the conversation: are leaders born, or are they developed? Nature versus nurture, or whatever it's going to be. Because I can go either way on that conversation. I believe it's wisdom, recognizing the tools that are being offered to you to best accomplish the mission. And then don't be a gatekeeper. Share that information with other people, because you never know when what you say is going to be what inspires that other person.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And that's it, man. Okay. Next question is, how can parents, I would say we could use leadership skills, or just what are advice you would give to parents as they work with adolescents, teens? Any advice there?
Yeah, great question. I think that as parents working with adolescents, I have 2 daughters, and we're all in this together, right? Parents need to support other parents. We're like a team, right? In a sense of, I think, there's a lot that kids need. They have so many needs, and growing up as a teenager in today's world is really tough. I think the most important thing is to you can always control the degree of love and affection you give them. That's important. Don't cease the love and the affection. Discipline can be tough. Sometimes communication, discipline, patterns, those things can vary based on circumstances, environments, right? But I think that the safest and best thing one can always do to their son or daughter is always remind them and tell them that you love them. Always show them, give them affection. Don't stop hugging on them and giving them affection. Say, I love you. I love you. And I think that you can always keep doing that, even though there may be, tough conversations, discipline. Hey, you got to get on them, do this, do that. All those things will come and go. But I feel that, and I say that because that was something that was never short. That was something that I always took with me from my parents. They were never short on affection and positive affirmation. Yeah, they made mistakes. My parents made mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're going to make so many mistakes as parents, but I think that as long as we're reminding them that they are loved, right? I think we put them in the best position to feel secure and safe, that they can go out there and make moves. They can take risks. They can take on challenges. They have layers of self-confidence that are built on, hey, no matter what the world throws, because the world's going to hit them. The world's going to hit our kids in so many places. But if they feel deep inside somewhere, there's places in this world, in my home, where I am loved. They got my back. If I break, I can go back to those places at least, and they can help me put these pieces together. And I think that's so important. They have to feel that we love them. So I would just say love and affection is probably the best advice. Awesome. Because we beat ourselves up as parents, but I think that's
we do. No, it's hard, man. Parenting kids is hard. And we all have our first kid, right? And unfortunately, I don't know if you and your wife are like this, but I can already tell the nuance of how my younger son is treated than my older son. And I was an older brother and I had a younger sister, and I used to always resent how my parents treated her differently. But hey, man, they're just different strokes for different folks, right? Like, as parents, you learn things, and then the kids are different, right? So they respond differently to different
love languages and stuff. Yeah.
And so, but a lot of times I think when I ask this question of my guests, and I'm hoping that the kids that are listening to these shows, that they take it into consideration and that they understand that hopefully their parents mean the best, they're doing the best, and we can all give each other some grace, right?
Yeah.
As we get, and I think what you said, is we're all in this together. I'm not the guy that says at 18 years old, my kid's got to get out. I think that I kind of learned this from being abroad and seeing other cultures, is that we can all win as long as we're contributing and we're all are appreciating the contribution. We're not taking advantage of anybody, right?
Yeah.
I think Americans, especially Western culture, we're kind of losing this whole familial thing because we're like, oh, you got to get out and go figure it out on your own. Well, that's not always the best thing, right? All right, let's go. What's the next question I got for you? That's a good answer, though. What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody struggling in an organization that they feel like doesn't have their best interests in mind?
Well, I think that another really good one. I think that in my experience, from what I've seen, right, from folks, because that's very common. A lot of people will feel that way, very marginalized in some environments. I think that what I would tell that person is really just be patient with themselves, because based on the situation and the circumstances, whether they're in a job and they don't like, they feel that they're not being taken care of, right? Definitely just find somebody to communicate with. Find somebody you can trust and talk to about your situation. Because obviously you can't trust everybody with that information, especially those who may be mistreating you, but find a trusted source, find a good friend that you can share and put that out there to, and try your best to, try to be very careful about getting good advice. Find people that you admire and try to get advice from those that you admire, right? Because I think that a lot of people are going to be quick to give their advice about what to do, but sometimes those situations are tough. I think for a young worker working in any organization, a young person, especially young or old, whatever, sometimes we go into places and some workplaces and environments and organizations are tough. And not because people are trying to get you, but because people are self-interested, And I think that, and I've always believed that, I tell that to my daughters. Sometimes I say, baby, people don't wake up trying to hurt you. It's just people are people. They screw up. And sometimes we pay the price. But so I think that's what I would tell that person, is show a lot of grace to themselves. Find somebody to really share and communicate with. and then before they make any major decisions, really think carefully, because even if they make a wrong decision, even if you make a wrong decision, it's okay. Just try to practice thinking through things. I've always felt that a person needs to practice the habit of thinking through things and then make a decision. Even if the decision isn't the best one, but you made a decision and you at least thought through it. And I think that if you're doing that, most of the time, I feel that that's going to mitigate from really making a bad one. You can make a kind of may not be the best decision, but at least you didn't really screw it up. And so I just think really kind of thinking through things and then communicating. Yeah, that's I think that's really common, Gary.
It is
that way.
It's very common, man. And, I think it's just, don't be too hard on yourself. Some of the worst criticisms we give to ourselves in our own head, right?
Totally.
And sometimes you just got to change that self-talk, and you've got to get out of that space where you're obsessing about the negativity, because unfortunately the law of attraction still applies. Right? And if you're obsessing about that negative, unfortunately it's going to start coming to you, because the universe is going to think that's what you want.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You gotta let that. It's hard. But like you said, talking to somebody about it is critical, because if you can get it out of you by sharing the load with somebody else, it's a win. It's just the one other thing I would tell them is, the thing is, not everyone though needs to know your stuff. Right?
Totally.
You got to be selective about who you share with, because it hurts when somebody breaks your trust, right? And unfortunately, I've seen that way too many times throughout my life on this earth. And I talk to the kids about that often. Like, I'm glad you got someone, but just not everyone needs to know your business, right?
Totally.
For sure. All right, here a little faster. We're on the ship. It's Saturday night. Are you looking forward to the pizza or the wings?
I'm a carbs guy, so I like pizza.
You like pizza, okay?
I like pizza.
All right, I need somebody to go to the birthing. I need someone to go to the working party. Which one do you want?
I'm sorry, repeat that, Gary.
I need someone to go clean the birthing, or I need someone to go to the working party. Which one do you want?
I think the working party. I always kind of enjoy. I always enjoy the tempo of the working party. I think you get better. I think you get better jokes during the working party.
You do, yeah. All right, hey, we're gonna watch a movie in the Chiefs mess. Would you rather watch De Niro or Pacino?
Pacino.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking back on your career, did you have a favorite duty station?
I think the funnest was Road to Spain.
Okay.
I think the funnest, definitely Road to Spain.
That's a tough one to beat, bro.
It's a tough one to beat.
That's a tough one to beat. Yeah. Okay. Looking back on your career, did you have a favorite Liberty port?
Well, Liberty ports were big on the GDub, and I think on the GDub, I think Singapore was probably our favorite. My favorite. I mean,
Singapore's hard to beat, man.
Between Singapore and Hong Kong, I think Singapore was my favorite.
Truth be told, I could see my wife and I going to Singapore for like 3 months and like getting an Airbnb and just hanging. I can see Australia too, right? Like, because it's easy to get around. English is, I mean, it's just English. And it's just super safe, and I loved it there, so I could see that. Yeah. Looking back on your career, what was the hardest qualification you had to achieve?
The most difficult qualification, I think, in terms of what I had to go through to get it, was probably my first warfare device, the FMF warfare device.
Okay,
yeah,
that's good.
It was tough. I almost quit. I kept failing. I had to take the test twice, and then we had to go through obstacle courses in the practical labs, going through this land navigation at night. And it took me like 3 times until I finally passed it. But then I finally passed it. But it was tough at the time. But thank God when I passed it, I was super excited because it was my first one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep. All right. If you were going to give someone advice, would you tell them to go overseas or stateside?
Oh, if they ask me, I'm going to tell them overseas. Yeah.
Hey, look.
And that's the thing. Like, every sailor has what's going on in their mind, their family situation. Yeah. They know their situation better than anybody. But I've always been a proponent. Hey, you're in the Navy, bro. Like, go out there, see stuff, right? Go overseas and broaden your perspective and your horizon, things like that.
I'm with you, man. I get it. Trust me. I did a lot of overseas time, and truthfully, I just liked it because it was simpler.
Yeah.
Right. It was a simpler life. I didn't have to worry about all the chaos that was going on back home, and commute to work was simple, right? And we're going to the exchange with the commissary. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The AFN network. Remember the AFN network?
saved a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh
Saved
yeah.
a lot
For
of
sure.
money.
But yeah. The
All right.
overseas cola, the cola didn't hurt either.
No, not at all. All right. Do you have a favorite movie series?
The Godfathers.
The Godfathers?
Yeah,
Awesome.
for
Love
sure.
it. Would you rather be independent or on a team?
Whew, man, that's a tough one. But I think oh my gosh. I say 50-50 on that one. I say 50-50 on that one because I think there's a very sophisticated answer to that, but to keep it short, by nature, I'm becoming more independent. I see the value in independent thought, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's something I'm taking very seriously. But I love being on a team. I love working with people too. So I guess the answer is there's a time for both. And I see like on my life, there's going to be a time for both. I'm going to need teams in my life. And then there's times where I'm going to have to go solo.
I will tell you, brother. So there's nothing harder than Chief and Chiefs, right? And the best Chiefs messes I've ever been a part of were a bunch of individuals who chose to be a collective, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's it. But every one of them could be the leader given the right moment. Yeah. And my role as the CMC was to recognize which one was the best one to lead for that particular role and throw them the opportunity and have everybody else back them up, right? And share the wealth, right? Share the wealth. Share the red meat with everyone, because I used to tell my chiefs, and I tell this to my cadets, there's enough room for everyone to eat at the table. Totally. And we all win if we don't care who gets the credit, right? So let's not worry about trust in the process. You got to trust in the mess, trust in the process, right? It's when people lose that trust, they get nervous, right?
Yeah.
Or they start to feel like their time's not being value added. Okay. Do you have a personal leadership philosophy?
I think I put it, it's my mission statement in Dave's Transmissions. It's real simple. Be good, fight evil, help people. Very simple. Yeah, it's very, very, very simple.
I like it. I can get behind that for sure. Okay, so in the Navy Chiefs mess, we have deck plate leadership, institutional technical expertise, professionalism, character, loyalty, active communication, and a sense of heritage. Those were our mission, vision, and guiding principles as Navy Chiefs, right? Yeah. I use these all the time to this day. I've used them for my own business. I've kind of synthesized them to be applicable to the civilian sector. Out of those, which one's your favorite?
I think I like active communication. I'm seeing a lot of value in that. It's funny because I look at patterns throughout my career. I think professionalism was always what they ranked highest on me whenever I was rated throughout my career. I just noticed that was always a pattern. But I think active comms, they're all great. I love deck plate leadership, but I think active comms is something that I'm really bought into at this point in my life moving forward.
Okay, I love it. All right, would you rather lead or follow?
To be totally candid, lead. I'm supposed to be a good guy and say, well, I'll follow when I need to and lead. Yeah. I like leading, bro.
I get it, man. They did my assessment when I was going through CMC school. They do a bunch of different things, right? And they say the challenge you're going to have is that you don't care about any of the credit, but you think you always need to be the leader because you want the team to win and you feel like you're always the best guy for the job. And they're like, so be careful with that. I was like, and they were not wrong. But it's also, you know what? I'm more than happy to give someone else the opportunity. They can convince me they're more prepared or more energized than I am. Because that's what I've always felt was a challenge, right? Yeah. You give someone an opportunity to lead, but then they don't bring the right energy or whatever it is. That's tough. Yeah. All right, brother, that is it. Do you have any saved rounds or alibis?
I want to share one quick C story. A quick one about the G-Dub. And I said this one at my retirement ceremony. It was the last story that I told before I gave homage to my dad and I closed it out. And it was very impressive. I was the stress was palpable on the ship because we were getting ready for 3MI inspection. And there was a spot check, the senior chief spot checking a junior sailor. And the stress was, you could feel it in the air, how stressed that sailor was. We're talking about sleep deprivation, stress, the kind of stuff people feel. And the senior chief is spot checking him, hard, crusty senior chief from the air department, spot checking our corpsman. And I'm watching it, and it's rough. It's late at night. It's like 11 at night, and he's sweating. You can just picture it.
Yeah.
And to see, and all of a sudden, and I've never seen, this was so cool. Senior chief said, stop, time out here. He said, let me tell you something. He asked the corpsman, you nervous? You're stressed? And he doesn't lie. Yes, senior chief. You know, and it's almost like his eyes got watery by just by hearing an honest question and giving an honest answer. The senior chief tells him, look, let me tell you something right now. Whether you pass or fail this thing, one thing's for sure. When you're done with this, you're probably going to go take a shower and hit the rack, go to bed, right? Yes. All right, just remember that. If you pass this thing, you're going to go take a shower and hit the rack. If you fail, you're going to pass this thing, you're going to take a shower and hit the rack. Either way, you're going to take care of yourself afterwards and you're going to move on. And tomorrow's going to be another day.
Yeah.
And you could almost feel the stress break into place. The kid, like he got like a little smile, like a little bit of relaxation. Like, and it was the coolest thing. Well, he finished the spot check, passed the spot check, went to bed that night. And that right there was one of the best examples of, I think, the kind of leadership of all the leadership examples. I just thought that was so cool that he did that. He gave that sailor with encouraging words that made him relax, feel better about tomorrow, and accomplish the mission. And I just feel like I was blessed to be around those kinds of leaders during my career.
Definitely, man. Well, David, man, I appreciate you taking the time to share your stories with us and to share your history and your heritage. And I really hope, I'm looking forward to watching your success. If you ever need anything, feel free to hit a brother up. I'm out here doing my thing in Florida. And take care of yourself, okay, man?
Thanks, brother. Same to you. I mean, I really appreciate what you got going on here. I love it. And I know you're going to also do great things. You're going to continue doing great things as well. Keep these conversations up.
Definitely, man. Well, thank you very much. Everybody, if you liked our conversation, like, subscribe. And Dave, make sure I got your information so I can put it in the notes for the videos. So I can make sure we get the word out there, okay?
Definitely.
All right, y'all, we're signing off. Bye, everybody.
And I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are life physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know